Oh, shalomi, homies. Hey, things are a little quieter now. It's roughly 2 in the morning. I can have some free flow, fire it off time. I got my heart rate up like crazy because there's a black bear stalking our chickens right now. And Chelsea came running in and was like, honey, I need you. I'm like, yes. Grab the machete and the flashlight. Let's go, son. She's like, I think it's a bear. I'm like, yes. I long for bear teeth necklaces. Do you guys know what I'm saying? Like ferocious stuff. I long for it. See, I don't have this like animosity with the bear. I love the bear. I love the bear. I have mad respect for the bear. See all those claws up there? Let's see. Lots of bear stuff right there. But I didn't some of those bear fangs and stuff like that. I didn't get those bears, not those bear fangs. I got a lot of those claws and stuff I've found or things I've taken off of animals directly personally with vengeance. Most of them were dead, when I took them off. Some of them were dead because I finished them. But anyways, I have this deep desire in the depths of my soul. We're going to get to all kinds of different topics tonight, but I have a few specific things I want to hit on first because I'm all amped up. And when tested, what comes out of us is what's been put into us with continuity in previous times in our life, and like when danger arises, the default for me is flashlight, machete, go, son, knife, certain styles of knife in particular. You're going to say that. Yes. Fantastic. Great style. Check it out. There's a reason. There's a continuity of things I have a predilection for. See the style of the blade? Pay attention here. It's important. Might just save your life in a bear fight. See that? Still one of my favorite styles. Just something. It's a default. First thing I cut with this was a tomato that I grew with my own poo. You betcha. Check out my guerrilla gardening video if you want to be a little more uncomfortable about how you can fertilize your fields with your excrement. It's good for you. And then I sprinkle seeds directly on top, and I grew a tomato plant. Seasons of ingathering. I finally got to eat the fruit of my labors. It was fantastic. It was delicious. And I cut it with that knife. That was the first thing I cut it with. Anyways, I digress. But Chelsea came in and was like, there's a bear out there. She's got her light, right? Because I've given them the tiny night core MT10Cs. That little flashlight. And she's shining in. There's bright green eyes way up in the tree. And she was like, it made a huge crash snap, and she's all like, she stayed up real late with me. And she's like, I think it's a bear. And I'm like, well, get the machete on. Let's go, son. Let's go, son. There's other options in my arsenal. There's always other options. It's just, you got to understand, like my default is silent stalking. I'm like, yeah, I've been waiting my whole life for this showdown. It's a different thing when you come at an animal with a firearm. Like they can feel it. There's an intent to kill, right? Whereas when you approach them with a spear, you approach them with a machete. There is opportunities for like leaving. There's going to be a personal interaction. There's going to be some up close kissing cousins closeness right now. It's going to go down horrifically. It's going to be absolutely violent nightmares, right? If it's going to be like, I am the steward of this property, understand something, bear? Seasonally, maybe you roamed through this territory, but that ends tonight. Understand that there is somebody else here. And these animals that I have in that tiny little box that you think is going to be delicious are protected by a ferocious person who will cut I don't want to cut his head off because I really want the hide. I want this pristine hide. I want this crazy, awesome feeling of there's a hide, honey. There's a bearskin rug for you. I've always had this dream of having a bearskin rug in front of a fireplace. My wife and I can sit down on together and relax together. That's been like a life dream of mine from the day I met her. I'm like, someday I will fight a bear for you and I will skin it and lay it down on the hearth of your mantle. It'd be super romantic, and then I'll wear it out when I want to feel real manly and be like, yeah, I fought for my animals and saved my wife's life. The bear left these savage scars on my face, just a little bit. Anyways, I had to have the conversation with her after I went and chased this bear. You have to film no matter what happens. Just keep filming, honey. Just keep filming because it's going to be legendary. Whether I live or I die, honey, it's going to be legendary. And it's going to be worth it because I want that mano a mano thing. Some of you got that warrior chutzpah, you just want that feeling. You want that effect, And to me, the default is just go back to what's been old, reliable. But the other day I shot some raccoons with a shotgun and that was shockingly effective too. And I was like, dang, mad respect for the long barreled shotgun. I've never really used lots of hunting length shotguns. And then it reached out and touched some raccoons that were going after our ducks. And I was like, this was highly effective. I finished them all with a blade up close and intimately. But man, that was profoundly interesting to me. I was like, mad respect, bros. Mad respect. So I understand you guys that have access to firearms, you gals too. Fantastic. Run with it. But, I'm always trying to continually encourage other people who live in places. Understand there's a lot of other people who watch this, who are going to watch this in the future in a time when it's a non-permissive environment towards firearms, or they already live somewhere. They're like, hey, yeah, I live in the UK where a knife like the one you just showed is super moderately illegal. They're like, oh my gosh, it could be a deadly tool. Yeah, 100% legislation, lawfare is a far more deadly tool. So anyways, I'm going to get off that soapbox for a minute, but I'm trying to equip people with things that they can carry on their person that are not as detectable, not as maybe eyebrow raising to the backscatter X-rays that are coming out of certain drone systems, so that they can mark people and for eliminations. You know what I'm saying? Just saying. Firearms are fantastic, but also have the redundancy, have the backup. You know what I'm saying? I'm just a big fan of the blades. We're going to talk about backups a little bit here, because going out into the forest like that, it just gets me all kinds of fired up. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this could be the moment. This could be the moment. I love it in the depths of the darkness when I'm like, I'm alert. I was ready for it. I was ready for it. I was really hoping my wife could watch me fight a bear. But anyways, the bear ran off. I respect the contract. If the bear doesn't want to have that moment, we're not going to have that moment. If he wants to run, he can run. I'm not going to chase a bear like that. You know what I mean? I respect the bear. I love bears so much. I love bears so much. I've been interacting with them from the days of my youth, and they've always casually left. The one exception that I have ever encountered was a bear that was in Sequoia National Park. It may have been the Great Redwoods or Redwood National Park. I'm pretty sure it was Sequoia National Park, but that bear had been desensitized to humans a bit too much. And so he did not disperse when he was chased. Black bears is generally what I interact with. This was a brown bear. This was our first time ever interacting with a brown bear. Black bears to me have always been like a smart dog. Like I feel like a blend between a dolphin mentality and a dog inside of a giant skin suit. They're a very peculiar creature. They're not like any other animal I ever interact with. Bears are wholly unique in a completely different category, and they're incredibly intelligent, and they're also very cognizant of you as you are and what you're thinking, your intent. They are detectors of intent on a totally different level, and they understand when you mean go. They mean they get it. Bears that have been around lots and lots and lots of continuity of food provision coming out of table scraps and out of trash cans and out of city slicker dumpsters, they lose that edge. They lose that mutual respect. They start to get conditioned to this being the trash can that they want to eat out of, and they don't really care that you're yelling at them and shining your strobe flashlight in their face. They're just going to hang out and eat trash. They become the raccoon of society, the different kind of problem bear, because then doofus number 7 can walk up to that thing without a machete and without lots of delimbing training, and they're going to get eviscerated. Yeah, it happens. But this bear in in Sequoia, my family was sitting down to cook a meal, and they were cooking meat. And in this park, the way that they handled it, see, here's an area that was basically more or less a gun-free zone. The way that the rangers were restrained in that park was to use something called hazing rounds, where they use these same thing, long-barreled, more or less hunting shotgun, but they were not allowed to use lethal munitions. So they use something that is called less than lethal munitions, which are highly advantageous. And I have an entire bandolier preloaded with less than lethal ammunitions. I have bandolier loaded with very lethal munitions, buckshot, right? So things that it's like small 9mm, they're basically 38 caliber bullets, 6 or 8 or 9 of them, depending on the size of them. And it launches out in a spread. That's something that's traditionally used for shooting bucks or people in the throat. It's a very effective round at, distances under 30, 40 yards, that kind of stuff. But then there's bird shot and other kinds of shots. But then you have these, like, I have a whole other specialty bandolier that's utilized for, armor piercing. When you got a team like a, HVAT team that's coming in to like do some mop up stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like we had one of those roll up into our driveway a while back in Colorado. That's like armored vehicle, bunch of guys loaded out in kit, equipment, and all the rest, lots of things that could melt and catch fire. So you load up an armor piercing slug. You can make these just out of a basic thing for any of you that load shotguns for whatever it's worth. Just come on a journey with me for a minute here. I've got a captured audience. What do you care? But you can load these things out, make your own really cheap. These are often sold as exotic ammunition rounds. Okay. But there's an armor piercing version of it, which is designed to penetrate. You can use it for plate armor and smaller amounts of like steel, stuff like that. But I generally look at this for penetrating armored windows. Yeah, because that was the targets that I had to go after sometimes. That armored window you can use in order to penetrate. That's something that is readily available for cheap and as a disposable waste stream, which is spark plugs. Spark plugs fit precariously well into a 12 gauge shotgun shell, and those things will shockingly penetrate prodigious amounts of ballistic glass. So you knock out their windows, and then the second round that you load into the chamber is something called Dragon's Breath. You just fire that on and light everybody inside there on fire with all of their nylon and all of their very plastic equipment, and it just makes them melt to death in a catastrophically violent way. That's a way to deal with that. So just tuck that away for those of you that are thinking about that. Anyways, the guys who were at, see the other one that's loaded up, let me just give you the bandolier loadout because some of you guys are savages. The other rounds that are stacked in there that are also highly useful, especially for thick brush environments, are something called flechettes. Flechettes are these tiny little nails that have fins on the back of it, and they are used to be able to penetrate foliage, right? Thick, dense, heavy brush, lots of leaves, lots of branches and stuff like that. They were designed, I'm sure somebody designed them way before they became publicly talked about as much, but they were fundamentally utilized to knock down a sniper, like in a tree. You can't really figure out exactly where they are. They're in this region, but it's a dense green blob. Firing off flechettes into that region is very effective, but they got their real meat and potatoes work in the Vietnam War. And we had certain unbelievable munitions, artillery size, mortar size, all kinds of variable scales of escalation of force that you could be deployed for that. Flechettes. Anyways, they load those into little shotgun shells. They're amazing, and those will knock stuff directly out of the sky. That would have worked great for the raccoons, but I had good line of sight. But if he was hiding behind a bunch of brush and stuff, that's a good option. That's in there. Okay, what's the other one that I use? Oh, for the less lethals, let's get there for a second. Oh, Nitro Express, guys. Those of you that are looking for the long range stuff for your tungstens when you need to knock out drones and you got to deal with those fast roaming cheetahs and that kind of stuff. Nitro Express. Is that right? Nitro Ammunitions. I'm gonna get their website wrong. Either way, there's some good brothers outside in Mountain Grove, Missouri. Anyways, they sell tungsten shotgun rounds of all variable kinds from buckshots. Uh-oh. Paused up here. Hold on a second. Lost you. There we go. We're back in action. Anyways. Nitro Express. They got tungsten rounds, which will penetrate and go a whole lot further. And they got them in buckshot. They got them in birdshot. They got them in turkey shot, that kind of stuff. But you can use those for knocking out stuff that's dense and made of metal and chasing you, in case it's all Terminator style out there for some of you guys. Something to consider. Regardless, there's some really cool stuff in the exotic munitions. But to get back to our story, in this less than lethal options in that bandolier, there's things like CS, right, which is what most people call tear gas, right? You can get canisters of tear gas that will come out of a shotgun. Those are something that is going to have an area effect, meaning a surrounding area is going to get impacted by that, and depending on your wind, you could potentially be the one receiving that. So those are less commonly used by people unless they're specifically more in the niche of riot control. And so they wear gas masks that have a filter for CS, right? They're not wearing their nuclear biological materials filter because those are super expensive. Police are generally issued one, and they're like, don't open it. Don't take it out of the package. Ever. I don't care if it's sarin gas. You don't take it out of the package. They only want to buy them once. You can blow through those CS canisters like crazy. But there's another option that's in the less lethal bandolier, which is basically mace that you can shoot at things. Just shoot them with mace. It's great for dogs, those pesky neighbor dogs. You want to wreck their sense of smell for a while because they've been wrecking your sleep. Dogs cause more conflicts than almost anything I've ever encountered in my life. Almost without question. They tend to be the greatest cause of conflict, interpersonal conflicts of almost anything I've ever seen. It's unbelievably effective. But mace is a good option for that, or to have a less lethal option of making somebody's day snotty. But same thing, you have an area effective. There's all kinds of other less lethal guns and pistols that shoot with compressed air, paintballs of that. Fantastic. Pepper balls, things like that. Those are great options. But then the other thing in the bandolier is something that shoots a beanbag round. Okay, so it shoots out at a relatively still fast pace, a fabric bag containing lead shot, and that is coming at a high speed, sometimes plastic shot. But those things come out and then they cause, massive kinetic impact, but it's dumping all of its energy right away into a very consolidated space. So it can bruise, impact somebody, and just overwhelm them, ideally with pain and the idea of like stopping what they're doing. So anyways, those are some of the less lethal rounds that can be used. They're called less lethals, not non-lethals, because none of the things coming out of the end of a firearm are going to be non-lethal in that regard. Even blanks, which seem like a simple thing where there's no bullet itself in the end of a cartridge. It's just, I can show you just for a second. This is a non-traditional bullet because it's a jacketed sabot, but there's no bullet in the end of this. What they do is they crimp off the very end of the actual brass here. So there's still gunpowder in here. There's still propellant. And then when it fires, that crimped, crushed casing opens up and it expels those hot gases out of it. Super important. It doesn't shoot a bullet out of the end of the barrel. However, giant caveat, those hot gases absolutely certainly can still be deadly to anything out there. Similarly, those little petals at the end of a brass casing can also detach. Not as common, unlikely, but possible. And it can shoot the person at the other end of that thing. So even in movies, a lot of times when you're seeing people firing firearms and you're seeing a fire semi-automatic, full automatic, more often than not, those sparks and stuff like that, they use a paintball gun that has little flashes inside it to make those sparks. But that's generally not how firing blanks really tend to operate. So just for what it's worth, they're super deadly at very close distances because lots of hot gases coming out of the end of something. If that touches your skin, then you fire those hot gases into a person. It's a highly effective way to kill somebody. It's like a syringe full of air. Super silent killing, prodigiously effective, not easily detectable. It's like nicotine or insulin or adrenaline, norepinephrine or morphine. Those are all like super default go-tos when it comes to silent killing. But in this state park, national park in California, the rangers were limited to less than lethal options for the bears unless they were actively in the act of mauling a human being. They're like, you're not allowed to shoot the bears. You cannot shoot the bears. You can scare the bears. And so they had a special cartridge, which was called a hazing round. And they would load this thing in and you would hear this shotgun go off. And it was just pure concussive force. So just pure sound, just like the firework at the fireworks show. That's just that white flash. And then the boom, boom, boom. Those, just thunderous in the chest plate. That feeling. Anyway, so we are sitting there. You can hear in this park, campground, progressive sounds of people banging pots and screaming, go away, go away, go away, get out of here, get out of here. You just hear it coming. You're like, oh yeah, game on, son. My family were really desensitized to this because we were living in the mountains of Colorado and we had bear problems constantly eating our trash. We had a big shed, heavy door, massive wooden door. Bears would rip that thing off like it was nothing. They left the claw marks in there. I was like, oh, this is savage. We were chasing with super soakers filled with liquid ammonia. Knock them down. Anyways, problem bears when there was a massive fire and drought and it was bad. Bears get hungry. They get super desperate and they get crazy. But this bear was cruising its way through the park. You hear the screaming getting closer. You're getting closer. And you're like, oh yeah, it's coming our way. We're ready. We got our pots in our pans, right? Because that's what they're like, you're not allowed. It's California. They're like, you can't carry a firearm here legally. There's options, but listen, it was not at the time. It's not my family's ROE. This bear comes over the corner. He's on a crest of a little rise. We got like a pop-up camper for cover in a van, maybe SUV at the time. Not a lot of options. You know what I'm saying? That bear comes up over, and it's a brown bear, definitely bigger than the black bears that we had in Colorado. And he's just moseying. You can smell our meat cooking, and he's doing this thing with his nose. And he's just really sniffing the air. We're all yelling, get out of here, man. Get out of here. Go on, get out of here. Get out of here. He's just completely immune to it all. Completely immune to it. Just has zero concern in the entire world of people making noise at him. Who cares? You're all talk. Like that bear now knows people are just noisemakers and food providers. So my dad eventually picks up a big rock and just chucks it straight at the bear. The bear then realizes, somewhat hardened target here. And then he moseys on to somewhere else. This continual waterfall effect through the campground as this bear roams through carries on until all of a sudden we hear the hazing shotgun go off. And then we don't hear any more pots and pans, which is wonderful. But I tell you guys that just so you can understand. There's a variability of options that are always available to you no matter what circumstances you're going through. Those guys had limited things because of laws and legislation that tied their hands to their options. But you know what? A machete tends to be available to most people in most places and localities and is highly effective. Tuck it away for what it's worth. But that's a 23-minute maybe diatribe completely off topic from what I intended to talk to you guys about. But hooray! There's some night ops for you guys. Have fun with it. Consider it strongly. He's a beautiful bear. Beautiful bear. I love them. I absolutely love them. They're majestic. They look amazing. And they are just incredibly sheeny. They have the great deep color black. And it's just, they're elegant creatures. I love them. I have no animosity or anger towards them whatsoever. I think they're respectable, prodigiously powerful creatures. They can outrun a horse. Something to consider. They can outrun you, son. Unless Yahuwah gives you the way. Hey, reference for you. Ready for this? Elijah outran a chariot, king's chariot level horses, full speed, downhill, outran them many, many miles. Spirit of Yahuwah. Did David not say, "You make my feet swift like the antelope," right? Swift like the gazelles. Come on. 2 Samuel 22. That guy. Anyways, I'm going to read you guys a little something that I stumbled upon earlier. Oh, my previous video was completely scatterbrained because my children were climbing on top of me. It was crazy. It was rowdy. I had the questions about communications for those of you guys that were into communication stuff because we're dealing with this crisis, this ongoing devastation where thousands of people are dead. Don't listen to anybody else that's trying to tell you that there's only couple hundred people dead. Literally, like one of our best friends, their sisters, in 80 people in this little town were dead. 80 people. Not one of them is registered in that death count. Like firsthand, 80 people dead. Witness death, witness bodies, witness the carnage, roads dissolving around them as the floodwaters just took this town completely out. This is not that far outside of metropolitan-ish areas, and yet none of that's registered. Okay. Something to consider. There's a massive intentional strategic cover-up so that people don't understand the scale, magnitude of horror that's going on over there. It's unbelievable. So anyways, we're trying to put together a whole lot of brainstorming and logistics on how we can be most effective because I've been wrestling with the feeling of, okay, I now have power back on. Many of my neighbors do not. Many of these people that I care about and love are living inside of the apocalypse war zone right now. How can we be effective administering to them? You know, it's like I've got my needs met. How can we go ahead and try to meet and nourish and minister to the people whose needs are absolutely present and pressing on them perpetually right now? So we're working on some options right now, but we got to get our ducks in a row before we talk to you guys about too much of that because we need to be assuredly working with the right kinds of people so that we can be effective in a non-permissive environment because what's taking place over there is kind of what I've been trying to gear you guys up for a lot of years. Just understand something. Many years ago when I first started and I did this video series called This Will Defend, and then it became Becoming Gibberim, right? I was trying to prepare you guys for experiencing and navigating life. If you guys haven't checked out the Becoming Gibberim series, now you'll understand a little more of the why of what I was trying to do. As I was trying to reach out towards people in two main categories. Ones who have familiarity with non-permissive environments, right? Drug smugglers, fantastic textbook example of the people I'm trying to recruit all the time, right? People that know how to navigate bringing a certain product of some kind that in one region may be completely legal, normal, fine, acceptable, into a region where it is not. Okay, that is a non-permissive environment. And so they have to be creative in their ways of getting product A into the hands of somebody else who is living in a zone where product A is 100% not allowed. So the example that I gave and read from at the time was a book called The Insanity of God, which was dealing with, the name is blanking. The guy writes under a pseudonym anyways. Anyways, he deals with underground church movements where they're moving supplies, people, individuals, evangelism, the gospel, the Bibles into countries around the world or localities where it is illegal to openly have displays of faith, to openly preach the gospel, to bring a Bible in, to proselytize, right? Like places like Israel, illegal for you to proselytize. Something to consider, you guys, for who the master of that nation is. It's not Yahuwah Elohim. Tuck it away and consider something strongly. I'm going to get lost in the weeds, so I'm going to stay on focus. But places like Somalia. Anyways, I'm going to get the name. It's going to come up to me, the author's name. Anyways, it's a great book. I highly recommend it. Anyways, he's got entire sections, just like another book that I also recommend, which is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Was it Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy? Something along those lines. I'm going to miss it. Anyways, that book is in the recommended reading section. I highly recommend it when it comes to dealing with some of the tradecraft for how a theologian, for all intents and purposes, in 1930s Germany and 1940s Germany, how they were navigating how to coordinate a guerrilla resistance movement. Guerrilla resistance movement. Nathan's reference, War in the Shadows, Robert B. Asprey. This has been one of those textbooks for me for a lot of years in studying, hey, how over time, this one is more of a broad historical spectrum of examining guerrilla conflicts from all the way back into, I think the origin stories for a lot of what he starts in is Greek, Medo-Persian timeframes, right? Xerxes, and that would be the time, you guys, Xerxes is the time of Esther, for reference, 300, Gates of Thermopylae, that kind of stuff. That's the time of Esther in the story of when we read in the scriptures, okay? Anyways, he goes through examining how guerrilla forces operated, leadership tactics, squads, movements, all kinds of things, logistics, supplies, how were they effective, where did they have their pitfalls, what were counter-resistance forces like, what were counter-guerrilla tactics, all the way through and towards modernity, towards the Vietnam War and Tao Li and the communists and the Russians and kind of into that periods of modernity. Anyways, one of my favorite books. Here's a more recent one that I have been starting to read through, which is written by Major H. von Dach, which is a great work called The Total Resistance. And anyways, when I glean through these, you guys, I'm looking for specific strategies to operate resistance movements. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to talk about like for fighting physically, tactically necessarily. What I'm trying to talk about is getting people things that they need in their hands, in their lives, in order to be effective at continuing resisting the ways of the wicked, right? So right now, the ways of the wicked is to completely, they're compartmentalizing regions in the Appalachian Mountains to not receive any care, to not receive any food, to not receive supplies, to not receive rescue, right? They're creating zones of isolation so that they can ensure, as far as it is unto them, the death, the depravity, and the destruction of certain peoples in areas that are not wanting to be protected and provided for. So they're creating this compartmentalization so that they can blot out trails of evidence in different regions and cover that up, right? So I'm trying to explain to Chelsea as we're going over, like, what are some ways that we can be effective at getting aid, getting supplies in there, getting garments, right? For example, or getting grain in there, getting water filtration systems. How can we be effective at administering aid into certain regions when it's so not allowed, because you're now having to deal with the version of these mega corporations, these bureaucratic agencies who are stepping in and taking over and then funneling all the resources that are coming in through their hands, right? And I understand how corrupt politics work. So I'm trying to explain to her why non-permissive environments and how to navigate those is very beneficial when we want to still be effective at administering be an effective minister into an area where it's not allowed. Okay, or they're going to want to make me jump through specific hoops where it's not allowed. They're going to tell me that I'm not allowed to come out of my house at certain times, days, or hours. They're going to tell me that I can't come out of my house unless I have certain kinds of passports, protocols, or genetic experimentations done on my persons, right? These kinds of things. Anyways, that was the heart of some of why the Becoming a Gibberim series got launched, because we're crux right in the middle of it. Now, people in my community are going through this unbelievable paradigm shift where grocery stores are empty and there's police checkpoints in order to go in, and there's curfews, and there's limited access to only a certain amount of people to go into a store. There's other stores that are gone. There's banks that are closed. There's businesses that are shutting down. There's business owners who are not being allowed access to their businesses. They're literally eradicating access in so many different means. And then they're controlling where people can go in order to have access to the types of aid or the relief or the resources that they say they need that way, right? I was trying to explain this to my daughters about trying to position yourself in a state of preparation so that your family's needs, your basic needs are met, so that you can be free to navigate in and out of that society and not have to go to those funneled in checkpoints, not have to go to get gas from that gas station where they're taking everyone's names and they're giving you a certain quota and they're registering you. All these other little things that start to come alongside of this, rationing cards, all that stuff, that you can be removed from that, right? How much further do we have to go from that disaster zone to find gas pumps that are still working, where the pressure is not there and the limiting is not there, right? Right now, for a lot of these people, it's about an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. You can come out. If you can get out of it, you can get to places where it's more or less kind of normal. But for some people, that requires them to walk physically 25 miles, 30, 40 miles through the Appalachians, which is robust. Let me show you guys a map that'll help you. So this is how I run operations. All right, let me show you something I found at a thrift store. I gotta figure this out. Hold on a second. Give me a second. Let's see how we can do this here most effectively so you guys can see a good portion of this. Okay, so this is, you see this map here. Hold on, you'll see it from a 3D. This is a 3D map, right? So instead of just a traditional map that's two-dimensional, flat on a piece of paper or flat on a board, right? This one gives me contour relief. So I'm able to see physically, okay, this is Western North Carolina. This map is specific to, this is put out by the Hubbard Scientific Inc. Incorporated, right? This is a transverse Mercator projection map. And then it has, so this is a quadrant, a specific quadrant here, and adjoining maps. These are all the pertinent numbers for this area of operations that, for those of you guys that may be entering into the zone or may not, or understand that we might be calling a whole lot of you to come out here and do some serious help shortly. And anyways, these are the specific, man, I can't see this, guys. I apologize, you guys, for the brightness here. There you go. So this is, let's see if I can get in. I got to figure it out. Figure out how to do this thing a little bit. You guys can bear with me. Okay. What you can see here are mountainous regions. Man, this is super awkward. I got a little book camera, you guys. You'll have to bear with me. I need a camera that's vertical above my head for this big shot stuff. But okay. We'll do it. We'll do it live, man. Stinking, let's do it. We'll figure out it. I'm going to go with it. You guys will bear with me. You're gracious. You're awesome. And you can tell me in the comments how I can get better. I love your criticism. Even you guys that are nasty, I still love you. I love you because it'll make me be better regardless. I take it. I eat it. I turn it into progress and success. Okay. So let me show you the areas of hellacious effect here. Let me get a little further away. Okay. This is a relief map. Sorry, that took me so long, you guys. Over here in this corner, in this quadrant, just so you guys have an understanding, this is Knoxville, Tennessee. Knoxville, Tennessee. And if you notice, it is a much flatter area overall. It is, oh, sorry, you guys. It's a much flatter area. It's an area where there has been damage for sure, sustained, but nothing to the same extent as these areas over here. We have a much more prodigious mountain system, okay? And you'll notice in these areas, if you guys can see here, there, that's Asheville, okay? You can see how there's these gradients of mountains. And what happens here in the Carolinas is water gets funneled into specific areas and is channeled out through the creeks and the river systems and ultimately into these larger drainage basins. That would be like up here. You see all that blue, right? Lots of water being drained into that region. Well, Asheville has a lot of the confluences of these different creeks and rivers coming into it at the French Broad River. So the reason we have a lot of destruction in many ways is because of that, is because of how it's brought there. I know it's lots of engineering stuff. We can get into that. They pre-saturated the area with 10 to 15, 20 inches of rain before the hurricane even got here. So all kinds of other stuff we can get into. Go check out, if you guys want to see more about that, go over to Perma Pastures Farm. Billy had Dane Wigington on about weather modulation and weather modification stuff. Highly recommend it. Anyways, tuck it away. This region, that's been most effective tends to be falling along some of these ridges where the Tennessee border and North Carolina intersect. That's where a lot of the devastation is. There's other areas that are nowhere near as affected. It's very localized in certain spots. So if the major, most non-permissive environment zone right now tends to be surrounding this hub of reality, the Asheville interstate and highway system. That's where, man, my mic's just jacked up. I've stretched something to its max and it's upset. Bear with me, you guys. Bear with me. Bear with one another. Oh, that's probably why. Hold on. I've discovered a horrific kink in the system. Oh. The cord has been severely damaged. Hopefully it'll still work. We'll do our best. Damn. We'll see if that gets it a little better. I apologize, you guys, for problems here. But regardless. Anyways, these flatter areas down here where the basins are, they tend to have been by and far less affected in these areas where that water had plenty of space to drain out and to spread out. Where it's concentrated, we have the greatest carnage in a lot of ways is where it was concentrated, where the water was consolidated at high slopes, steep slopes, high concentrations of wind and water. And those areas that got drastically ravaged tend to fall in a lot of this more rugged country in a lot of ways along the border between Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, even up into West Virginia. It came down in certain areas and pockets of it are relatively unaffected at all. There's trees down and there's some damage, but nothing to the same extent. But for this example of what I'm trying to explain to you guys is we have a non-permissive environment being cultivated and fomented here in this region of the Asheville region. There were this confluence of low bottomland farming country where towns and cities and establishments and roads have been built up prodigiously over the years. That's our, let's just say, for example, non-permissive environment. When we want to get goods and resources to the people that are in the much broader area, many more people have been affected by this than just this tiny little pocket that's getting all the press coverage and the news coverage. Lots more places that need that kind of coverage. You have to go outside of the normal parameters in order to be effective to deliver that aid. I'm going to set this down. Hold on. Oh. You have to be able, those maps, just look them up, you guys. Highly recommend them. They allow you to be able to physically see the localities of what you got to go through, the physical steepness and the gradients of terrain, of how rugged and ridiculously challenging it is to navigate in that kind of an environment. So I really like those because when I'm trying to explain geography and regional like challenges, uniquenesses, like I'm trying to teach my children where power substations are just to understand how power is produced in a given landscape. And I show them how dams are built and how lakes are built and how power is then generated here and can be shared onto this grid where it's distributed out all over the place. That map's very helpful for that. That map is also very helpful for coordinating like, hey, these are areas that we can be able to use and exploit these kind of vulnerabilities through topography to be able to enter into a certain locality, maybe unseen. So tuck it away. You guys who know what I'm talking about can pick it up where I'm laying off. I'm going to get lost in the weeds and I'm going to lose a bunch of folks into guerrilla strategies. But for our example here, if I want to be able to smuggle a whole bunch of Bibles into an area that they're not allowed to be at, right? My go-tos. The scriptures, right? ISR scriptures. I love these. They also have pocket-sized editions of them. Fantastic, right? That's something that can be packed out and be able to deliver it into people as we deliver them water or grain or garments or whatever else is it. Very, very helpful. But we got to coordinate all that stuff, and I'm getting a little excited about being able to try to work on that. But that's the thing that we're thinking about a lot of, because this may be happening in my region currently right now, and an opportunity for us to step up and be able to start working with the right kinds of people who we do trust and we do know, who have been doing this very effectively for a long time, you know, like Bear Independent and Grindstone Ministries, phenomenal people, trustworthy people who have lots of experience doing this kind of stuff, especially in disaster relief. Anyways, I'm rejoicing that there's still righteous people. There's wonderful people that we know who are inside that non-permissive environment. There's wonderful people that are outside of it who are supplying and reloading and helping other people. So it's a very interesting ongoing developing situation right now. But whenever I get into these kind of conundrums. I literally have to start slowing myself down, starting to make our lists, starting to get organized, but then slowing down and going to the scriptures of understanding how people have to navigate these kinds of experiences previous times. How do we be effective at being able to function in a society that is no longer allowing us to function freely? And to me, that's where those two kinds of main stages of people, the ones that have kind of a more baseline, what we would say is a criminalistic mindset, people that don't follow the rules, right? The natural governing laws. Those people are able to freely navigate inside of that kind of environment much more readily than those that have been conditioned successfully through 15,000 hours of compulsory education to go along with the plan, which is to ultimately be trusting of the government as your father, that the government will provide for you and protect you. That's the social contract that schooling indoctrinates people with. It also indoctrinates them with learned helplessness, that it does not equip you with the skills that you need in order to put up an intellectual self-defense or a physical self-defense or a moral self-defense and have an ethical approach to living and navigating through life, or entrepreneurial, like actually having entrepreneurial power in your mind as an opportunity to help solve problems in the world, right? To be a successful person that adds value to the lives of the people around them. Those things are not entrained into them. They're trained to follow the government's direction and you will be okay. We've got people that are day 8, 7, and 8 right now. For a lot of the day 7, for a lot of people, this is when things went to heck, is 7 days ago. There's a lot of them that are waking up to that reality that 7 days into this, they're fundamentally learning nobody's coming to rescue them. So it's a whole other side of the equation. Don't fall back on that, right? Learn and develop and cultivate the skills while you can, while it's comfortable for you, whatever your situation is, to be proficient in these kinds of skills, because skills are lightweight. They take up room in your space of your mind and your body, and they enable you to do all kinds of capable things. So that's kind of those big lessons that we should have learned, but instead we didn't. Let's set that aside for a minute. The people that are understanding that they can learn a new skill set at any time, people that have a growth mindset, or understand they can take in and learn all kinds of new information, like how to navigate that society when it is adversarial towards them, when it's adversarial towards what it is that they want to do, right? I have been preconditioned my entire life and well trained in navigating society that's non-permissive, right? It's not permissive to have this kind of approach in life, right? But there's other places in the world where that's literally how they do business. You understand the like how bribes work is like a toll road as you go to other parts of the world. Like that's normal reality. Like bribes are exactly what gets you through places automatically, right? But bribes in here not looked at the same way. So if we can take and recruit the people that already have that kind of skill set, right? It makes it a lot easier for them when they have a zealousness for actually having a mission, a new mission, right? They can convert those skills so they're not slinging dope into their neighborhoods, but instead they're slinging grain, or they're slinging garments, or they're slinging water bottles, or they're slinging gasoline and generators, and they're smuggling that stuff into people where it's illegal for them to enter that territory, right? Fantastic. Thank you. And for giving me something to get my heart rate up and make this a lot more exciting of an opportunity to do good. Those are the kinds of people that I'm always trying to recruit and inspire. And I'm also trying to help those that are on the other side of the fence, that have been on the rule following side of the fence, that have gone to the big state parks, they've gone to the beautiful places, and they have the sign that says, "Don't cross the fence." And I understand that's there for the doofuses, because you got a lot of people that don't know how to take care of themselves in a physically basic way and be respectful and not poop in the spring water. I get it. But we got those people all over who are like, cannot break out of that. We did Sukkot one of the first years, man, probably our second video on our YouTube channel about the Feast of the Lord, right? We went to this I shouldn't say too much. We went to a park, state park-ish thing. And anyways, they had signs about where you were allowed to go and where you're not allowed to go. And I don't pay attention to any of those signs. I understand those signs are there for doofus number 12, right? They're not there for me. They're there for reasonable, self-capable adults and people that can take care of their own children and understand, yeah, if there's cliffs here, I understand most certainly I can die. I don't need your sign to tell me what I can't do about it. I don't like that. But we had other rule followers in the groups, the people that were like 100% never broken a rule. They've been wonderful, well, good Christian people who have never broken the rule, right? And I'm like, just come on over to the other side of this. You can see all of these incredible features that you can't otherwise see from over there where they're telling you to take your Instagram pictures from. And it was like a visceral, violent internal conflict about stepping over a physical. This is just a stick wood fence. There's nothing there. There's a sign there. There's not guards. There's not security. There's not cameras. There's nothing. We're in the stinking wilderness, more or less. But this sign is keeping somebody in an internal fence from stepping over and having a beautiful, panoramic, incredible experience that's being inviting. I'm recruiting them, man. And I can see that internal dialogue is just wrecking their shop. That's programming, right? That's deep programming that came from stay in the herd, stay in your class, don't get up. You raise your hand if you have questions. You're not allowed to ask a question if we tell you it's not time to ask a question. You're not allowed to go pee or poop unless you get permission from the authority. You get permission for everything you do, from bodily functions to when you eat, when you sleep, when you drink, when you're happy, when you're sad. Everything comes from an authority figure. That indoctrination is very effective to a lot of people. But then you have the divergence, right? But when I'm trying to help people come across the fence and understand it's okay. It's not breaking the scriptures. You're breaking the man-made traditions. You can do it. It's amazing how I can set them free. Anyways, these are the kinds of situations where those that have been trained that the government will provide for me perish. And what perishes in them before anything else, before they physically die, is what dies in them is hope. What dies in them is belief, is faith. And they understand that they put their faith in something, what we would say, like churchianity language, an idol, right? Something that they believed had the power to save them, to provide for them, to protect them, to nourish them, to sustain them, right? We have adopted in our country, right, this whore of Babylon that we live in, the land under Semiramis, Columbia. We are governed by the goddess of Columbia, this great harlot, okay? That idol that sits at the Statue of Liberty holding the Luciferian torch, right? Columbia, Ishtar, Inanna. These were the other names, that Semiramis. These were the names of this deity, this mighty one that governs this nation. She is the hierarchy over the pantheon of the gods, which is fighting and changing over time. This is, check out my War of the Ages series. This dives into more of that. It's like a 15, 20 something part episodes going through that understanding of how the spiritual and physical realms and the clashing of that, how that plays out in reality. That physical battle in the pantheon of the rulers of this society has created a culture where Semiramis, just go back a step in history so you can track with me for a second. Semiramis, some of you might call him Ishtar, where we get Easter from, and all of the bloody pagan rituals that are invoked during the time of Ishtar. And Astarte, in the scriptures, she's called the Queen of Heaven. She's referenced as the Queen of Heaven. Another culture calls her Miriam, this goddess, the Queen of Heaven, who's invoked with a white and blue, right? This is the same deity, same entity that is being invoked over all of these things. She's called the Queen of Heaven. Anyways, they were making cakes to her and eating the cakes to her. Same stuff, been going on forever. But she was the wife of Nimrod, as we describe in the scriptures, right? They had two different kind of modalities for governing society. One was through power, projection of power and strength and mightiness. Nimrod ruled the nations with rebellion, with power. The word that's used in there is Gibor. Gibor can be translated as giant. It can be translated as mighty man of valor. It can also be translated as tyrant. All right. What somebody does with the mighty power that they have, the mighty courage, the zealousness, the tenacity, the perseverance, right? Benaiah, going into a pit with a lion on a snowy day to fight that lion. That's a Gibor, a mighty man of valor. That's a courageous act. That's a valiant feat. That's an act of bravery and exceptionalism, one of oneness, right? But it also can be the same thing that's weaponized, where truth is set aside and somebody instead cultivates manipulative tactics. They cultivate the tools of propaganda and engineering psychological operations to steer a society in a specific way, using things like the Hegelian dialectic or Machiavellianism, right? How to rule and govern nations, not in their best interests, but manipulating them, right? That's a form of power and control that was deployed by Nimrod to help capture and control the world, the minds of men of the world. Semiramis, she had a different approach. Columbia, she had a different approach to govern her subjects. Hers was to win their hearts, to win them through love as opposed through fear, right? And her strategy that's most often deployed is the one that we would call like social utopianism, right? That everything can be provided for you if you will subject yourself to the government, to the ruling society, a social welfare state. If you will exchange your autonomy, if you'll exchange your autonomy and give us your fidelity, your loyalty, we will accept it. We will accept it. And what we will provide as a terms of this contract is we will feed you, we will clothe you, we will protect you, we will nourish you, and we will provide for you economic means so you can survive in that, right? This is why we have the welfare system like we have today, because we eradicated and divorced men and women from their prospective righteous roles, their innate roles as provider, protector, right? Nourisher, sustainer, tent peg holder, sustaining the household, right? Those contracts that a husband and a wife have together. My wife has a duty to go look after the children, while I have the duty to go after the bear that's potentially going to destroy our flock or potentially cause harm to my family, right? That's a social contract her and I have together. That's in our covenant. This is in our covenant agreement, right? I got you, baby. I love to be the man in that regard. She loves it when I am the man in that moment, right? I love when she's the mom snuggling and dealing with sleep deprivation and exhausting babies and night weaning or like all that stuff. I abhor it. I'm like, don't wake the bear, right? Different mentality in the giant bed. She's got a totally different nurturing, loving, incredible, compassionate stuff. You wake me in the depths of my sleep, son. It's not always good, right? I have these conversations with Abraham, even from his youth, right? We've had a lot of in-depth, intense conversations about waking dad up continually. You deal with it. It sucks when you're in the middle of it, but you learn how to communicate. That social contract that parents and husbands and families used to have with each other was raped, was penetrated with an ideology of independent, right? With weaponized feminism in a lot of ways to get people into these different roles where equal rights was not the same as equal worth, equal value, equal opportunities to actually fulfill what we were made to do, right? And so we increased the needs, the dependency for the autonomous woman to have government papa, government father be her husband. That contract of marriage contract between the woman and the government became highly effective when she entered into the workforce, when she left the role of teaching and instructing and raising up these highly capable, incredibly successful individual children to become highly capable young men and young women and into adulthood alongside their father in that relationship. Those relationships were destroyed with child labor laws and with compulsory educations and truant officers and mandatory boarding schools, all kinds of stuff. Highly educate yourself on it, guys. It's a fascinating study. But that pursuit, that endeavor to destroy people, to destroy the family system, created so much of the culture that we see now expressed generations later. The effects, the fruitfulness of that is coming to its fruition, where we have so many people raised by social welfare in some tenet, facet, or form, that we have created somebody who is wholly dependent on some outside agency to satisfy and fulfill their needs, right? Whereas just same disaster taking place in the Appalachian Mountains 150 years ago, 180 years ago, completely different experiential results, right? Because the autonomy that individuals have, the rugged self-preservation and love for their neighbors and provision and the storage of tools and resources and things you would need, the skills that you need to understand how to find pure water, that yes, you guys, there's contaminated water, but listen, in the vast majority of these haulers in these hills all over western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee and southern Georgia or northern Georgia, listen, out of the vast majority of these things, there's seeping springs, especially during the rainy season. We're in a lot of the wet season right now. There's water, primary water, pure, delicious, wonderful, abundant water that is available to many of these regions, that just requires a basic understanding of how to go from a raw state of water to maybe a filtered state of water so that I can get that in my body. But even just the basic fundamentals of following a creek uphill until I find a pure origin source is so divorced from us because it wasn't given to us in those classrooms. We weren't given the life skills. One of the better things I got inside Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts before it's turned into this version of ridiculousness that it is now. I became an Eagle Scout. I went all the way, son, to the Eagle Scout. Those those things, those skill sets I learned were put to the test by going out in the field and learning how to get water for myself and to purify it, different ways of purifying it, by boiling it, right? There was chemicals that could be added to it, whether it was iodine or bleach or all kinds of different stuff you could use, all kinds of different things you can get creative with. Grapefruit seed extract, that's another one that you can carry in your person on a bottle. You can carry with you. It's also fantastic as a medicinal for you guys that are having, trying to recover from all of the death stuff we've been eating our whole life. Fantastic supplement. But filtration systems, gravity fed water filtration systems with something like Catadine makes a good one. Let's see, one of my favorites is no, it's not. Maybe it is Catadine. Anyways, there's a big plastic bag that has, you fill it up with your dirty water, and then you hang it up in a vertical position. It can be half gallon, 5 liters. And then in the straw, in the actual seam of the tube, there is an inline water filtration system, so that as the water comes down and is pressurized, it presses it through this filtered membrane system so that it comes out with clear water. That's one of the best systems ever. These things are readily available. They're like $30 to $100. You can get them. Change your life forever. That's a simple tool that people can have, right? There's all these different little things that people could have been given an education on, and instead they were given an indoctrination on. Water comes out of the tap. They were indoctrinated their whole life through public drinking fountains. Water comes out of taps when I push buttons or turn faucets. Not understanding the intricacies of plumbing, not understanding the intricacies of water pumping systems and water filtration systems, and none of that. Not given any of the understandings for where it comes from. Thankfully, many of these areas that are affected do have people that do have individual autonomous water systems known as a well. That's amazing. That's leaps and bounds above a lot of other parts of the country. Not everyone, I understand, but it's a huge leg up in the competition. And there's literally one of the things that's been keeping a lot of people alive is a single generator on someone's well that is literally providing water for their entire community. One well, one generator, and fuel and oil and all the things that must go with the generator. It's not just one thing. Fuel, generator, oil, fundamentals, filter. Those things are allowing these little microclimates to survive. Something to consider for your preparations. The two biggest areas of deficiencies I've seen in my own preparations and others around me is storing the right kind of fuel. I am freaking screaming constantly now about love for the propane quiet generator and a lot of fuel because it's much more readily to transport. It's much more available. Even during this crisis, you guys, I've been able to go into some of these absolutely stripped out areas and still find propane canisters, still find propane refills are still taking place, where service trucks are still getting maintenancing and filling up and topping off even big tanks, right? That industry is not being targeted and attacked like gas and diesel is. It's a lot easier. It's a long-term storage option. But anyways, lessons learned from inside the kind of ring of chaos here. But those little things are providing a completely different world for people because now they can have water. So in areas that don't have wells, completely different story, right? Completely different story. Now they're subject to that reinforcements coming from abroad until they're able to figure out a way to get their own water for themselves. So I digress. These are all the things that I'm picking up and starting to store away and understand. Man, these complexities of social sterilization of intelligence have had these long-term horrific effects that play out, especially during disasters. And it's only increasing in orders of magnitude. The amounts of violence and looting and murder that are taking place in strong-arm robbery, right? Right now, by normal people, those normies, those rule followers who had all of their identity shattered when they realized nobody's coming to save them. No one is going to just bring you the food and the water and the clothing and the shelter and the provision and the protection that the military and the police and the fire department and everybody always said we always would have, right? My food stamps and all the other things, the healthcare and all that stuff. When all of that's gone, it doesn't take that long for those normies, those people that are hard conditioned to trust the government. A switch gets thrown in them inevitably. If they're going to survive, they're going to have to go break the rules. They're going to have to go break out of those norms. And those are the kinds of people that get super desperate and are not used to navigating that world, who are now robbing people, aid workers, trying to bring in supplies, robbing them to take the stuffs because they're getting in the panic state, total desperation, fight, flight, panic, freeze, right? These emotions in this primal state. There's a lot of people that you're interacting with, and they're in this kind of state right now, you know? They're not, that critical thinking capacity is shut down and they're purely reacting. And so it's that trauma state that you're dealing with a lot of these folks. But if you can learn these skills and equip yourself with an understanding of how to navigate and operate on getting your basic needs met, it gives you mental buffer zone to handle continuing to maintain calm, cool, and collective thinking amidst crisis like that. It's a very sad thing to watch people die because they picked the wrong thing to put their faith in. They feared the wrong thing. They feared what other people thought of them. They feared not having enough. They feared failure, you know. It's brutal to see people have their idols die in front of their face and them die with it. But it's been going on a long time, you guys. I'm going to go to you guys. Let's go to Zechariah 8. I want to read to you a couple things for understanding what calamity looks like when people reap what their idols sowed them, which is empty promises. They told them lies, sweet lies. And you know what? When they were in their need, tends to be why Yahweh says, go cry out to the gods that you made with your own hands. This system you guys built with your own hands. Go ask them to save you, and you're going to get what they'll give you, right? This is the whole book of Hosea. Something for you. I challenge you guys to read it. Hey, here, I'll put this out here. Because this is Nathan's style. I went and chased the bear with this machete. I'll tell you what, you guys. Whoever memorizes the book of Hosea first, we're going to call this the Hosea reward, right? This is the one I chased that bear with. This is a 1909 bolo made by Springfield, I believe at the time. This is a pattern. I got this off of, I think it was Chicago Knife Works. It's the only place I could ever find this. This is a reproduction, modern steels, modern equipment. Yeah, it's gotten a lot of stink. Not a ton. It's gotten a fair amount of use. For me, it's on the fuzz of overly heavy, right, to be effective at wielding in my dominant hand. And I thinned out the handle here. This is all beautiful white oak, brass buttons. White oak, gosh, gotta love it. And then an actual hand guard. Super fundamentals. Anyways, this was fielded in response to the United States when we were doing the whole colonial empire thing. Understand who America, the goddess of Columbia and Babylon are. Following the empire method from our progenitors, known as the Brits, going over and invading the Philippines and waging that war to take over that country, make it our own, right? Land of Ophir. Shout out to the God Culture and their Land of Ophir series. Check it out. But anyways, they were trying to deal with how to handle jungle, severe, intense jungle, and they started making their own machetes, and this is the one that they made. And I love Filipino martial arts. I love their bolos, and I love salat and a lot of the arts that I learned with this. But this is outside of my perusing of my default go-to. It was in my hand when I went after the bear tonight, but because that was proximity alert, I needed it immediately. Whoever memorizes the book of Hosea, this one's yours. It's been sharpened by Nathan. It's been beaten the snot out of by Nathan, and it's got this little brass guard here, this collar to protect the leather. I had to remove the back end of it because I needed to repin it because this thing was coming loose. It popped off. So I had to repin it with some copper rivets. I did it twice. And anyways, it's got this little thing to retain it here. For those of you that are looking for viable machete options, this is one that is for those of you who have formidable hands and means to wield it effectively. So know your skills. It's practically a very robust, heavy, in between an axe and a chopping tool. Book of Hosea, though, will transform your life forever. Whoever memorizes it, you send me an email, a video of you saying the whole thing. This one's yours. And if any of you do memorize it, and that thing's already deployed somewhere else, I'll get you a savage, ridiculous other short sword of machete of some kind. I promise. You can take me up on it. Knives are just streaming in right now. I've got knives coming. Praise Yah. Knives are coming to me. Fundamental thing I like to distribute out to people. Two things I give to people most immediately in every crisis I've ever gone through is a knife and a flashlight. Almost always. They tend to be the things I give away the most because most people don't have them. And when you're in something like that, a fundamental essential becomes a flashlight and a knife very quickly. A Bic lighter too. My defaults. I digress. Let's read Zechariah. Read Hosea, though, if you want some other context for understanding how Yah's ticked because the people keep going and hooking up with the whores of the idols of the gods of the nations, right? And going under their system. They become obedient to the system that is under the spiritual reign and the power of that God, right? The gods of Assyria, right? We're going to name a whole bunch of them here as we go through. In the book of Hosea, though, he's literally like, listen, fine. You want to go be with them? Go be a whore. Go have lots of lovers. Go open yourself up to all the other ways of living your life. That's fine. You break the contract of our covenant. You go get what they got to offer you. And he says, fine. You want to go get your linen, your wool, your grain, your wine, your water. He's like, you go get it from them. See if they'll give it to you. But I'm taking back what's mine. You go ask them for those things. It's like, and then they give you a poisoned version of it. They give you this horrifically corrupt version of it. They give you the augmented version. They give you the Azazel version. They give you the version that's been augmented, transmogrified to something completely other than a natural version, like pure wool, the efficacy and the effectiveness of pure wool garment, a pure wool blanket or a poncho, life-changing, life-saving sustenance and protection compared to a lot of the alternatives that people have turned to. Understand that's literally the book of Hosea is this promise that Yahweh says, I'm taking all these things away. I'm going to take the sound of the millstones away from you. He says in the book of Jeremiah, you're not even going to hear as part of the covenantal breaking, the promises of judgment against them. He's like, I'm going to take away the sound of the millstones from your midst. He's like, but if you turn back to me, I'll give you your grain back. I'll give you your wine. I'll give you your water. I'll give you your oil. I'll give you your wool, your linen, your silk. I'll give these things back to you as part of coming back to me, because that's part of the promises. He's like, I'll feed you, I'll clothe you, I'll water you, I'll nourish you. He's like, I'll do those things because I'm your husband now. I'll take care of you. Those are part of the promises in the covenant of the contract. The blessings when we read the scriptures from beginning to end are parts of those things. Like these are the things he's promised us. Take care of us so we can trust him, right? All right, go to Zechariah, the book of Zechariah. For those of you that have the Yah scriptures. This is page 998. Now, understand, just for timeline, okay, we're going back quite a long ways into here. This is just before, this is what they would call the lesser prophets, right? These are the people that were foreshadowing a whole lot of woes about what was going on at the time of horrible stuff taking place, cataclysms and judgments and warnings to the people of the house of Judah or the house of Israel to turn back to the ways of Yah because they're about to be destroyed, and prophecies about the future, things that are coming in the future that are going to wreck their shop. And the word of Yahweh of hosts came, saying, thus said Yahweh of hosts, I shall be jealous for Zion. With great jealousy, with great wrath, I shall be jealous for her. For thus said Yahweh, I shall return to Zion, and I shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, and the mountain of Yahuwah of hosts, the set-apart mountain. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, again, old men and old women shall dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, each one with his staff in his hand, because of great age. And the streets of the city shall be filled with boys and girls playing in its streets. Thus said Yahuwah of hosts, if it is marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days, should it also be marvelous in my eyes? Declares Yahuwah of hosts. Isn't that just a beautiful? This is the promise of the fulfillment of like what he is going to open up to us when he provides for us that level of wonder, where children are playing in the streets safely. Like just even that has been perished from most of our lives. Most of that, the children just playing freely in the streets safely, has gone. It's gone. But he's promising these are the things that are going to come. Just hang in there. Now listen, thus said Yahuwah of hosts, see, I am saving my people from the land of the sunrise and from the land of the sunset, and I shall bring them back, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I shall be their Elohim in truth and in righteousness. I want that to be our God, right? The one to rule over us, the one who rules in truth and righteousness. So many people have lost hope in these days because the things, the people they put their hope in have proved untrustworthy. And that's brutal because you were sold a bill of goods that representation, no taxation without representation, right? So these representatives of ours were supposed to be indicators, take our voice, our ideas to the House of Assembly, to the Congress to the gathering place and be able to speak for us on our behalf. And yet what we have instead inherited is these leaders and these rulers who are not representatives of us in any way, shape, or form. They're representatives by and far of the corporate entities or the financiers who put them in those positions or help to navigate them through the political coffers to get them in those positions of power by and far, who were willing to compromise tremendously in order, like through crises like this, micro scale. They were like, yeah, they were willing to be one of those corrupt officials who turns away the people from doing it the right way and funnels instead the resources into the wicked's hands, the wicked pocketbooks, right? That kind of corruption gets you promoted in the world of psychopathy, in the world of sociopaths and psychopaths. They get promoted. So many people are disenfranchised that anybody's going to actually fix this thing, you know? But please understand, the fixing comes from an understanding of how to navigate this world, understanding the spiritual powers, the physical powers, and how that interacts in our own basic life. So listen to this. We want the one who rules in truth and righteousness. And you know what? You're not going to find it in a normal man. You're going to find it in the King of Kings. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, let your hands be strong, you who are listening, in these days to these words, from the mouth of the Nabim, the prophet, of the day of the foundation, the day the foundation was laid for the house of Yahweh of hosts, the Hakal, the temple that was to be rebuilt. For before these days there was not a wage for a man, nor a hire for a beast, and there was no peace for him who went out or came in, because of his enemies. And I turn all men one against another. But now I am not as in the former days to the remnant of this people, declares Yahweh of hosts. Because of the sowing of peace, the vine gives its fruit, the ground gives her increase, and the heavens give their due. And I shall cause the remnant of this people to inherit all these. And it shall be as you were a curse among the Gentiles, O house of Yehuda and house of Israel. So I shall save you, and you shall be a barakah, a blessing. Oh, let's see. I don't know where I cut off. I'm going to go back a little bit here. Because of the sowing of peace, the vine gives its fruit, the ground gives her increase, and the Shemaim give their due, the heavens give their due. And I shall cause the remnant of this people to inherit all these. And it shall be as you were a curse among the Gentiles, O house of Yehuda and house of Yisrael. So I shall save you, and you shall be a barakah, a blessing. Do not fear. Let your hands be strong. For thus said Yahweh of hosts, as I purposed to do evil to you when your fathers provoked me, declares Yahweh of hosts, and I did not relent. So again, in these days, I have purposed to do good to Jerusalem and to the house of Yehuda. Do not fear. These are the words you should do. Speak the truth to one another. Judge with truth and right ruling for peace in your gates. Do not plot evil in your heart against another, and do not love a false oath. For all these I hate, declares Yahuwah. Understand, he literally said he purposed it in his mind to do evil to the house of Israel and the house of Judah. He literally settled his mind. Their hard-heartedness, their stubbornness, that stiff-neckedness, that total commitment to rebellion, the embracing of all the things. He's like, don't go do those things, okay? And he's like, they went and did all those things. He's like, listen, you go do all those things, you can't stay in my house. It's like a parent who's had to kick their child out of their house. They're like, listen, you don't, this is the covenant we have in here. You don't follow these things, you can't be in here. You don't get these things, right? You don't get the covenant. There's something called a threshold covenant, right? This is much more preserved in Middle Eastern cultures. When I went to Afghanistan, I learned firsthand about threshold covenants. When we first went into this village, we had to bring our security. We had to bring food. We had to bring water. We had to bring protection, right? As we began to meet the needs of the people that were over there, they no longer, they came to us and they said, you no longer need to bring your security. You no longer need to bring food. We will take you in. Well, we will feed you. We'll clothe you. We'll shelter you. We'll protect you because you have crossed over the threshold and you are in a covenant of protection with us now. And a lot of the protective measures extended to us about the same distance as it would for one of their daughters, one of their own children, right? But a daughter specifically. That was like the level of covering when somebody came into your house. So when somebody is violating that in your house and they're going out and they're breaking all those things, they're coming back, bringing all their junk with them, They're breaking that covenant, And this is what was happening. The people of Israel, the hard-heartedness of the people led them into this rebellion. And they literally broke that contract so much, no matter how many times they were warned, how many times they were called to come back to it, repent, shuv, like return. They hardened their hearts, they stiffened their necks, and they would not return. So I'm going to go back into a book that's called Second Kings, so you guys can jump back into the historical narrative of what he's talking about when he set his face against them, when he poured out his wrath, when he poured out his judgment on them, and he raised up an entire army of invaders, the Assyrians, right? When you're dealing with the house of Israel, this is basically 10 of the tribes of Israel. There's lots of different tribes. It's not just Jews. It's not just Jews. 11 other tribes. Those other tribes were living in different parts of the kingdom at the time. He literally set himself up to destroy them. And so he raised up an entire army, another people whose language that we're not familiar with, right? The Assyrians. The Assyrians were unbelievably effective warriors, right? Vicious, well-known, well-documented for their horrific means of public execution, of violence, of graphic, explicit violence against those that they'd captured, right? Well-known terror tactics, right? What we would call today modern terrorists, right? Oh, that they were terroristic in a lot of their methodologies, highly effective warriors, not a cultured people in the same way, apart from the arts of war, highly effective in that. That's the people Yahuwah raises up to come in and execute his intentions to judge his own people. Now, this is in chapter 17. This is like the great fall of the house of Israel. In the 12th year of Ahaz, the sovereign of Yehuda, okay, that's the house of Judah, Hosea, son of Elah, began to reign over Yisrael. That's the house of Israel. They're in a different city, not Jerusalem. That's the house of Judah. The house of Israel is ruling and reigning in a place called Shamaron, Samaria. For 9 years, he did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah, but not as the sovereigns of Yisrael who were before him. Shalmaneser, real documented historical figure, the sovereign of Assyria, Ashur, came up against him, and Hosea became his servant and rendered him a present. But the sovereign of Ashur found a conspiracy in Hosea, for he had sent messengers to So, the sovereign of Mitzrayim, Egypt, and had not brought a present to the sovereign of Ashur, as year by year. And the sovereign of Ashur shut him up and bound him in prison. And the sovereign of Ashur went through all the land and went up to Shamaron and besieged it for 3 years. In the 9th year of Hosea, the sovereign of Ashur captured Shamaron and exiled it to Yisrael, and exiled Yisrael to Ashur, and settled them in Halah and Havor, the river of Gozan, and in the city of the Madites. Now this came to be because the children of Yisrael had sinned against Yahweh their Elohim, who had brought them up out of the land of Mitzrayim, from under the hand of Pharaoh, sovereign of Mitzrayim, and revered other mighty ones, and walked in the laws of the Gentiles, whom Yahuwah had dispossessed from before the children of Yisrael, and of the sovereigns of Israel that they had made. And the children of Israel secretly did matters against Yahuwah their Elohim that were not right. They built for themselves in high places in all their cities, from watchtower unto the walled city, and put up for themselves pillars and asherim on every high hill and under every green tree. For those of you that are wondering what a high pillar is, like it calls these pillars, you and I would readily identify these things as sun pillars, okay? Another time they're referenced as sun pillars. These are obelisks. Obelisks are also what you would see on the tops of Baptist churches. That's what you'll see on every high hill, especially out here, honestly, in the Appalachians. You can be back in the most random podunk holler in the middle of deep Appalachia, and there's going to be a Baptist church, and it's going to have its sun pillar firmly fixed, okay? Those are 100% only origin right here. These are things that were worshiping the sun, entities. They believed that the rays would land on that phallus of him and charge it up and anoint the priests, right? So there's lots of different modalities of how this priest class operated. However, that's what those origin stories of what those things are. Obelisks, sun pillars. It's the missing male member of Nimrod. He's chopped into pieces and cast off. And then Semiramis, right? Ishtar does a ritual, magical working ritual to raise him back up from the dead and gather all the cut up pieces of him. But she's missing his member. And so she instead makes a phallus for him. And then the rays of the sun come and create life. So this is why our Capitol building is a giant womb of Isis with 72 pentagrams of the apotheosis of George Washington. It's a ascension ritual chamber, ritual magic chamber for the guys who are laid in state there, to go through the path of ascension and sit on the throne of Zeus, right? The throne of Satan, like George Washington did. Yay, you made it. Congratulations, you master mason. Now you go on your path of ascension, right? That's why that thing's there. And then it has the giant Washington monument, right? 555 feet, 111 feet below the ground, 666-foot thing, right? Why that's there? That's that ritual magic chamber, okay? Those things always follow each other. So understand, those sun pillars are still all over this land of idolatry that we live in today. The Asherah poles, right? Those things are, in one sense, like a small microcosm version of it that you'll see played out in the scriptures. Is Gideon in his front yard, his dad, Gideon the Gibborim. Gideon, stop grinding. Why are you beating out the wheat in the wine press? He's like, I'm scared. They take our stuff all the time. Stinking tyrants. They come in here. It's awful. He's like, listen, go down and tear down your father's Asherah pole, destroy it, knock down that pillar, burn it with fire. That's what he was called to do, to tear down the idols in his own house before he went and tore down the idols out there in the world, right? Fundamentals, super critical. Anyways, you've grown up in a country, in a landscape where that's the norm, where we have idolatry everywhere, abounding. Every state capitol building. This is the land of many idols, strange idols. Everywhere you go, you drive into a city and they're like, hey, what's the heck is that pentagram? And why is it dedicated to the Master Masons and the Knights of Columbus and all these other perverse, false oath swearing secret societies, right? We just read about these guys. Yahuwah hates them. He hates them. Understand something. You swear these oaths, you enter into the kingdom of the camp that Yahuwah hates you. You're an adversary to his kingdom, period. You're an absolute double-tongued, fork-tongued, double-minded man, unstable in all your ways, because you've bowed yourself to an allegiance with an absolute kingdom of confusion. It sucks. That's the fruit of it, though. Understand, this is what was plaguing the people of Israel, and it's what's plaguing the people in this country today. No different. Ready for this? We're going to keep going. It gets a lot worse. They start participating in a lot worse stuff. And burned incense there on all the high places, like the Gentiles whom Yahuwah had removed from their presence. And they did evil matters to provoke Yahuwah, and served the idols of which Yahuwah had said to them, do not do this. And Yahuwah warned Yisrael and Yehuda through all of his Nebim, his prophets, and every seer, saying, turn back from your evil ways and guard my commands and my laws, according to all the Torah which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants, the Nebim, the prophets. But they did not listen, and hardened their necks like the necks of their fathers, who did not put their trust in Yahuwah, their Elohim, and rejected his laws and his covenant that he had made with their fathers, and his witnesses which he had witnessed against them, and went after worthlessness, and became worthless, and after the Gentiles who were all around them, of whom Yahweh had commanded them not to do like them. And they left all the commands of Yahweh their Elohim, and made for themselves a molded image, 2 calves, and made an Asherah, and bowed themselves to all the host of the Shemaim, the heavens, and served Baal, and caused their sons and daughters to pass through the fire, and practice divination and sorcery, pharmakia, and sold themselves to do evil in the eyes of Yahuwah to provoke him. So Yahuwah was very enraged with Yisrael, and removed them from his presence. None was left but the tribe of Yehuda alone. Yehuda also did not guard the commands of Yahweh their Elohim, but walked in the laws of Yisrael which they made. And Yahweh rejected all the seed of Yisrael, and afflicted them, and gave them into the hand of plunderers, until he had cast them out from his presence. For he tore Yisrael from the house of David, and they made Jeroboam, son of Nebat, the sovereign. And Jeroboam drove Yisrael from following Yahweh, and made them commit a great sin. And the children of Israel walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did. They did not turn away from them, until Yahuwah removed Yisrael from his presence, as he spoke by all his servants, the Nebim. So Yisrael was exiled from their land to Asher, as it is to this day. That is the consequences of following leaders who are idolatrous, people who are forked tongue, speaking the truth interjected with falsehood, right? Will lead people to death. If you follow someone, if you put your trust in someone who has a continuity of lying, of continuity of deceiving, of beguiling, of manipulating, of controlling, of contriving, of compromising, you are going to reap the consequences of that. But if you put your faith and trust in the one who has truth and righteousness, right? And if you help to support and strengthen and establish those who are positioned to be integral, somebody who has maintained their integrity, right? To support those people, to give them encouragement, to strengthen the work of their hands, instead of putting your hope and trust into a government that is antithetical to the ways of righteousness. In fact, the government that is anti-Christ by and far, ruling and reigning and interjecting. Like, understand our foreign policy directives. Just go with me for a second and understand. In order for other nations to receive foreign aid from the United States, they must agree to forms of LGBTQ and abortive practices. These are part of our requirements for them to get money from us. We are the exporters to the nations of predominantly three main exports, right? Maybe four, we'll say. The main predominant one of our main exports that the United States makes is pharmaceuticals, pharmacia, a drug sorcery, right? These are prophesied to come, the people that will be thrown alive into the lake of the fire, right? This is our drugs as our main export, right? Pornography, our other one, okay? War, violence, killing, like empire building, eradication, guerrilla warfare, horrific violence is exported by in masses to so many. Entertainment through music and through industry are some of the biggest exports that we actually put out to the rest of the world. We are the ones who make the world drunk on violence by and far. It's inflicting a mentality of violence. The efficacy of the entertainment industry had long arms, reaches all the way out into Afghanistan, outside of Kabul, Afghanistan. When I was meeting with Afghans, they literally told me they thought America, that the men and the women were Baywatch, that show, the television show. They thought that was a representation of actual American life accurately. That was their interpretation of what America was like. That's the representative of America to them, and the place that literally fundamentally took away the opium trades. They made the opium trade fundamentally successful over there. They went from no opium over there being grown, no more poppy fields, eradicated in 2001, to free flow poppy fields. Unbelievable. 1,000 tons of heroin coming out of there every year from zero under the Taliban. Not having any of it. They had none of that, right? We give them a bunch of weapons and arms and munitions. Now, when we leave, they eradicate the opium trade once again, right? It's like this cycle. This has been happening forever. The British Empire has been controlling the drug trade in and out of Afghanistan forever. It's been a long time, hundreds and hundreds of years of history of going in and out of that place to create drug empires. Something to consider. Read the book, Dope Inc. Go to my playlist, you guys. They're my snatchfromtheflames.com. Reading resources, recommended reads. You'll find Dope Inc., British Empire. Fantastic understanding of how East British, just a whole other thing, how they control nations through drugs very effectively, and violence, right? Strong arm banditry in its own way. But when people put their trust in these rulers to be the ones that provide for them, and we have bad, wicked, vile, evil people being put in those positions and being promoted in those positions. Understand, this is why we need a physical intervention from the Most High. We need supernatural intervention from the Most High for his deliverance, so that this remnant of people who still have maintained their integrity, their righteousness, their love for their neighbors, their love for the right things, for truth, they can get put in positions of effective means of that. But you know what? That does come from massive repentance. That comes from recognizing, wow, I have put my trust in a system that is definitely not going to take care of me. I need to learn to orient my life to start to unplug from more and more of the systems of where I'm being provided for out of that system, and start to find ways to get provision outside of that system. You need to learn how to navigate towards a gray economy, a black market economy, because that's where many of us will be driven. We'll be driven there due to circumstances. There's a lot of people who are having to go and navigate the gray market economy. Shoot, I want to get raw goat smoke for my babies because formula doesn't exist anymore, right? I want to get raw goat smoke for my babies. In the area that I live in, it's illegal for someone to milk their goat and to sell that to me raw, okay? They have to say not for human consumption on it. That's how we have to navigate. That's a gray market economy, right? That's an economy where you're persecuted and you have to be creative in your branding to get a product into consumers' hands that otherwise they would not have access to, right? That requires somebody who is a staunch rule follower to kind of bend and find the legal loophole to still navigate and be successful, right? But my wife and I have been navigating that gray economy of finding these deals and finding people, making relationships, right? Purchasing the non-material, investing in non-material assets of relationships so that we could find and procure resources outside of the normal thing. We did that. We started really digging into that 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago, especially 5 years ago. That became a norm, right? And so I encourage you guys, those of you that are still in an area that's relatively normal, that's calm, listen, don't take it for granted. Cultivate those relationships now. Learn how to navigate getting food outside of the grocery store, because the time you don't want to be figuring out how to navigate that problem and how to fix that problem is when everybody else is trying to do the same thing. You want to have dug that well before you were thirsty, built those relationships before you needed them, right? That you are already somebody that's known by your neighbor. You're known as a reliable, trustworthy, upright, righteous person, right? This is somebody they can enter into a social contract with and know that you're a person who keeps their word. You're a man or a woman of integrity, right? If they can know your character before crisis, it will expedite the process of facilitating mutual reciprocity of provision and protection for each other during crisis. It's so much more beautiful. My wife and I have gotten to know lots of those other neighbors that we hadn't really met yet, besides the whole like, hey. Now we have a lot more first name basis because we have weathered crisis together. We've looked each other face to face in the midst of crisis, and we've extended to each other help. We've extended to each other needs. What do you have? I have excess of that you need more of, right? We've gone through those touch points of face-to-face conversations. It's great if you can cultivate that before the crisis. It's so much more advantageous for you to get uncomfortable, to stretch yourself out of the level of uncomfortability and start terrain mapping your neighborhood, start terrain mapping your apartment complex, get to know the people that could potentially be your allies amidst something like this, and start to identify and terrain map those that would not be allies, right? Very helpful things that you can do. But you know what? If we can have hearts of integrity, if we can be people who have surrendered to our sovereignty, to the King of Kings, and understand he has a way of leading us and shepherding us and guiding us and providing for us and protecting us, that's supernaturally perfect. That's so much better because he is not confounded. He's not confined to the material limitations that men are. He is supernatural. He is eternal. Yahweh is eternal. He has the means of being the judge of all the earth, who can nullify all those horrible social contracts, all of those covenants you've ever had with these other deities, whether you agree that you have them or not, these parasites that you picked up along the way, bodily, physically, and spiritually, the funky, skunky stuff in your trunk. You know what I mean? He has the power to expel the darkness and grant you the soundness of mind, to restore to you a sound mind, to give you courage, to give you conviction, to give you boldness. These are the things that he promises with his spirit, to give you wisdom and knowledge and understanding, to place the dread of you on your enemies so that you don't have to be afraid of what tomorrow will bring. He's like, I got you. I got you. Listen to this. This is what I was reading. I washed myself in John this morning. Full immersion. I'm going to read from this one. I'm going to go back to the old trusty rusty here, my ISR scriptures. I love this one. Hey, you mighty man. Who's driving from one of these now? Continuity of paired. Check this out. I'm going to read you a section. I tried to read it earlier in my commie question. Speech and communications. What I was trying to ask in a short and concise manner was, to those of you guys, biggest other area of needs of improvement out here are communications. We are struggling. There is a major breakdown in communications. Those of you guys that communications is your big world, can you please help explain to those of us who it's not our world, what would be your best recommendations at various gradients of budget, or if you guys have a video that you would recommend, a playlist that you would recommend, what are the means that we can communicate with each other in this very rugged environment, very rugged, very wet environment, very important. How do we best communicate with each other in that environment where its line of sight is highly limited and very subjective, very relative? How do we communicate with each other as a squad, as a team, as a neighborhood, as a community, as somebody who's on the other side of a holler, somebody that's on the other side of the hills or on the other side of the continental divide? How do we communicate with each other and coordinate resources and efforts and strategy? Okay. Starlink has been one of the ways that those, an autonomous system that people have been used to still have access to the internet, access to information, cell phone, videos. That's all great. But what are field portable versions? What's stuff that I can carry on my person, like a radio, personal radio that I can talk to other people? What do we need for home bases? What's a way that I can listen and talk to people that are a long ways away? All that stuff. We need all the gradients of that. You know what I mean? Please help us to understand how to navigate that better, because a lot of us, that's not our specialty. And we could really benefit from the wisdom of those who have gone there, been there, done that many times and been successful at it. Please help share that information with those of us that don't know any better. It would be greatly benefited. It would be immediately used. Anyways, I'm going to read from you John 14, because this is the Good Shepherd. My wife and I, a couple of years ago, were in a very different place. We're living full time in an RV, which we did, traveled all over the country. And many times we did not know where we were going tomorrow. We did not know where we were going to live. We did not know where we were going to get water. We didn't know where we were going to get electricity. In one of these areas that's most devastated, we were living in a parking lot there at one point in our life. I was passing kidney stones, and we had no way to get water. We fit it. The campgrounds were closed. The state parks were closed. Farms refused to have us there unless we were fully shut up. It was an unbelievably trying and a pretty desperate time for my wife and I back then. I had a video at the time that I was recording, and this is all at the beginning of that Becoming Gibborim series, and we were filming and trying to upload there. It's called Tears for Fears. That was about the time frame of when we were living in that parking lot. Crazy, insane cauldron at that time, but for our good. It's good to have suffering. Praise Yah for that suffering that I was in at that time. Peeing blood, bro. Curled up in the fetal position. Sucking life. It was hefty, but it made me get resourceful about having a water key. Something you can buy on Amazon. They make a 3 version that's got 3 different options. You can go to the back of a business that's closed and shuttered, and you can turn on their spigot with a water key. Highly recommended. Something I learned. But I was having to try to pick up my RV and go drive to get water at truck stops, trying to drive into different truck stops, gas station, and find which of them had potable water that I could get, because I couldn't get a garden hose. Anyways, it was a difficult time. It made me cry and pray a whole lot more. And you know what? When we get down to those reduced needs, it makes us cry out in a very different way. Well, fast forward a little head in this time of our story. We were living in Missouri. We were at a campground, and we had to leave that campground. Very short notice. We were being asked to leave, and it was time to go for us. And we were dealing with the conflicted emotions that were coming with, we have to leave, and we don't certainly have a place to go tomorrow, And when I was praying, this is what he gave to me, was John 14. Let not your heart be troubled. Believe in Elohim. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many staying places. And if not, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I shall come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, you might be too. That word rocked my world. And I wept and wept and wept, because you know what? He proved himself to be true hundreds of times, over and over again. The Father went ahead of us. We used to pray all the time. We're like, send your spirit ahead of us to go pick the place that we're supposed to go dwell in next. Like send your angels ahead of us. Like it said in the time of the Exodus, he would send his angel ahead of them to scout out an area for them. Right. And then he would select the spot and he would highlight it with fire, son, there. That's like a beautiful thing. And we would pray that all the time, because we moved hundreds of times in that RV. Some days we would move multiple times a day. And it was just this trusting in him to lead us and to guide us and to take us new places. And now I'm sitting here and I'm grateful beyond measure that he has brought us to another staying place. And you know what? I have peace of mind of knowing that no matter I can say it confidently, no matter what your situation is currently or whenever it is that you're watching this. If you are now living in a time, in a situation where it is literally you have to pick up and move every single day, understand he can still go ahead of you and prepare staying places for you. And he has good things in store for you and ways of providing for you and protecting you and feeding you and nourishing you, clothing you, satisfying you, giving you the desires of your heart, unimaginably beautiful ways of doing it. But you have to be willing to go on that journey and trust that he will give you a little bit of light to guide you on that journey. He'll give you a lantern worth of light on your path to lead you there. He may not give you the highway. Sometimes he lets you jump on a highway and get you smoking far. And other times he's going to have you walk like a little child, like my little son walks right now. He's fast. Pearl's a little less wobbly. She's more wobbly. Where I am holding him by the hand and walking him, letting him learn how to take his first steps. Some of you were there. It's okay. Be there, but don't stay there, right? You got to keep going and start maturing up in your boldness and your faithfulness to watch. We'll follow him no matter where he leads you. So anyways, y'all, now that it's officially almost morning, I want to greet you all with just say, I love you so much. Know that you are loved. Yahweh loves you no matter where you are, no matter your animosity towards him, towards each other, towards your neighbor, no matter what baggage you're carrying today, whatever burdens you're carrying today. Know that this word has lightened my heart, and I know it can lighten yours, and it can give you joy and strength amidst incredible despair, amidst crushing fatigue and exhaustion. He can satisfy you and nourish you like nothing else on this earth can. So I encourage you, I challenge you, store up that word in your heart. May Yahweh unite your heart to fear his name. I love you guys so much. Thank you again for the support, the encouragement, the steadfast, wonderful, incredible wisdom you guys share with us. And always, I love you guys so much. Understand that the days may be evil out there, you guys, but never forget, you, precious, beloved son, daughter, were born for such a time as this. So stand up amidst the oppression. Stand up to the wicked and resist evil, and Yahweh will fight for you. Stand for the truth. Fight for the truth. Strive for the truth unto death. And Yahweh will surely fight for you. I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon.